Welcome to the Fighting Giants podcast, Mr. Stephen Andry. How are you doing today, sir?
I am peachy. Let's
Just,
go back a few decades.
just go back a few decades.
I'm doing well, or as my son would say, what is it? Dude, you're doing great.
Hey, that says a lot right there.
And
That
he's only 17.
the insightfulness of teenagers, right?
Yes,
Sometimes they find that nugget. You're like, where'd you come up with that?
exactly. Been
So,
listening to some of my generation music.
right, probably. So I got a story to tell you, Stephen. So I got in trouble with my wife this week, and I was like, and now that we've been doing this podcast a little bit, about every time I get in trouble, all I was like, I got to talk to Steven about this. So, because,
Let's do it online, some online therapy, man.
right? If there's anything I'm getting out of this, is free therapy. So,
There you go.
my wife woke up, and just let me just clarify too, is I'm not a great dancer. I'm going to put that out there. Like we had a wedding a COVID wedding that did not have a party celebration dancing, and that was an answer to my prayer. And
Hey,
so,
brother, can I protect you for a second?
yeah,
I never, ever took you as a great dancer, so you're safe with
yes,
me.
I am rhythmically challenged. And so my wife woke up the other day and she goes, I'm really mad at you. I go, but she's like, but I shouldn't be mad at you. I'm like, okay. I was like, I had a dream that you were dancing with somebody else. And then I saw you dancing with that other person. I'm like, well, clearly it was a dream because first off, I was dancing. And so I go,
So
and so,
translated, no dream, nightmare.
yeah. And so my first question was like, was I dancing any good? Like, was this, and she looks at me, she's like, I can't be mad at you because I know it was a dream. But just if I sound frustrated, you were dancing in my dream with somebody else.
You were betraying her in your dreams, in
I
her dreams.
So I made her dinner, ordered flowers.
In her dream or in
In
reality?
reality, I think I made breakfast that day. I was like, let's get the day off to a right start now.
Boy, that was pretty smart on her part.
Yeah, right. All of a sudden, she's gonna start. That's gonna
You
happen
got
more often.
breakfast out of it.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
point. Good point.
Yeah.
So
So,
I thought of you, and I was like, so
so
do dreams and like, does is there there's you always find the deeper thought in things or behind a curtain. So I'm curious what your thoughts on if someone came into your office and gave you this story, what would be your initial questions?
well, there's so much um, differing information around dreams and interpreting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got these ideas of some of the older psychology type dream interpretations. You've got the scriptural spaces where your young men will dream dreams and all that space. I tend to fall into the ballpark of uh, kind of what's stressing you or what's present in your life being real in that nervous system, right?
Okay.
So maybe there's a place in your wife where she is afraid of losing you or uh, those type of places. Where we've seen it play out in our sessions is sometimes it's a partner just trying to connect with what her gut is telling her, right?
Hmm.
So as we build this podcast, there's two plus fields we're looking at
Hmm.
from the compulsive addictive behavior standpoint.
Okay.
The traumas and the lies of faith communities and stuff are also part of this, but so much of them boil down to the one who has struggled with the compulsive addictive behaviors and the one that's been betrayed by it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that goes along with the betrayed is that they have been gaslit often. So there's a crazy making, which are two separate. Go for
So,
it.
well, how do you define gaslit? I've heard this term now over the media a number of times. How would you define being gaslit or gaslighting?
Okay, that is an incredibly powerful and important question.
Mm-hmm.
I'll answer it in light mode.
Yep.
Now we'll get into deeper because we want to make a note that that's something we want to explore more in depth. But in general, it's this place of, and it's based on an old movie, which for today's purposes isn't relevant. But it's this place where women have, and I'm using the term women because that's right now where we see the most betrayal.
Okay.
But men are experiencing this as much as in non-binaries, etc. But there is this place where the one who has been offended has been lied to in places that they have felt the one that is the problem or guilty of misreading things.
Hmm.
So this idea of trusting the gut and often gets healed over the journey because they realize that what they were perceiving in their gut had some level of truth to it. The other individual just had to lie, which is the nature of addictive behaviors.
Oh,
You're
interesting.
trying to compartmentalize, you're lying to cover up behaviors, use of money, time spent, all that kinds of crazy stuff. So you have to kind of create smoke screens, and that plays into gaslighting.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's a deeper space.
Okay.
And it doesn't always happen just around addiction. You get all kinds of issues around that. Well, this is where you'll hear ad nauseum this kind of core belief that we bring into this journey that we're starting with starting Fighting Giants and its whole nonprofit piece is this idea of learning to live in truth without secrets.
No, it's an interesting thought there.
Which part?
Like living in truth with this of exposing the secrets.
Right.
And so,
So most of us don't do that well. Now, here's the kind of let's protect ourselves space, the idea of helping us not shame, because we really haven't really been taught how to live and the value of living in a place of truth without those secrets. We have grown up in places being manipulated, having to manipulate to survive, living in family systems that show one thing, do another. There's all these places, even culture in general minimizes feelings, for example.
hmm,
Don't feel, don't fear, don't worry, right? So we have a highly addictive culture from workaholism to alcoholism to the epidemic around porn and beyond, which is a big piece of our practice and our goal with healing. It's a very profound space.
when you have clients come into the office, like how quickly, or quickly might not be the right word, but how hard is it to define the real issue, like the root cause? Because there's so many layers that have to kind of be unpacked to figure out. Like I think of my wife with the dream. In a past relationship, she was cheated on.
So there it is again.
Yeah,
Does she care about you?
absolutely,
Does she love you?
absolutely.
And does she fully understand the depth and breadth of what love looks like?
I think she,
Probably not.
I think there's obviously some hurdles in there, and I think we all face those hurdles of from we also got married later in life for the full picture. It's not like we got married in our 20s. We got married in my 40s or late 30s.
You're old. Hey.
Yeah, when you get to my age, Steven, you'll understand.
Yeah. Man, I got a long way to go. And
So
if this is just on the non-visual side, like it's only they don't see my gray hair. So
it's quite great.
so let's explore what your wife is living with
Yep.
in general, right?
Okay.
I'm making some of this up because I've never really had a sit down with your wife. I've
Yeah.
met her once, right? But the reality is you're living in the shadow of a man who betrayed your wife.
Hmm.
Okay. We know that that is called betrayal trauma.
Okay.
That looked very much like PTSD. So she's living with some level of post-traumatic stress, right? And if she's never been cared for by a healthy, trained professional therapist, etc., she may have been shamed or minimized or just said you'll get over it in time. And rarely does that work.
Hmm.
So if she's not been cared for around the betrayal, which is extremely common. So, for example, you talked about guys coming in and us poking and figuring out
Yeah.
how much of that's present. Most of the guys I have come through referrals, and most of those are because they've seen success in other married situations, right, with other couples. One of the key pieces is their partner getting the help she needs to, she or he,
Hmm.
right? Because we are seeing a rise in betrayed men, right? Not saying that men are the only ones who step out of and do inappropriate things. What happens is you have this reaction to the partner just reacts in a what do we call more of a fight or flight response. It's actually fight, flight, or freeze and appease, and there's other versions of it. But in general, they're having this kind of trauma reaction. We have at many levels had to apologize for other therapists and pastors and family members and community systems that have neglected the pain of that partner.
That's an interesting issue to have, is because you have people in authority that, people look up to. I think I've told you before, is like there aren't very few titles that people really look up to anymore.
Right.
Even, you know, coach, and pastor are probably some of the last two that people, at least without knowing someone, will give them some form of respect if it's in front of their name.
Right. Yet, one of the reasons we're starting this nonprofit, this Fighting Giants, doing this podcast, etc.,
Yeah.
is because we want to be a support to these communities, specifically faith-based and those communities that need accountability that they really don't have, right? So, for example, me as a therapist in our profession, I answer to my licensure board.
Yep.
The state has a place where it can say, you're not a therapist anymore because you violated A, B, and C.
Okay.
You go into a business situation, you have a set of outcomes that you need to meet, right?
Hmm.
There's a paradigm, there's a set of goals, et cetera, that are put before you. And your boss and or higher ups can say your performance isn't there. You need to buck it up or get out, right? One of the few places that we see a lack of that is in the church.
Huh. That's interesting.
Now, there are the organized denominations,
Hmm.
your Catholicism, Methodist, but in these kind of more evangelical, non-denominational spaces, there is a level of accountability to the board,
Yep.
right? And or other places. However, there's not this expectation of continuing education, right?
Yeah.
There's not this broadening. We tend to accept what they say based on their interpretation of scripture or the Bible or stuff like that. Not anti that. I just want to support those pastors because we can't expect them to know everything.
Oh yeah. I kind of think of like a doctor, where it's like you have doctors with specific fields that they can't know everything about cancer because their specialty is somewhere else.
Right. And their role is to be a leader of the flock, so to speak, right? To
Yeah.
lead the sheep. Well, most of these guys they're really sharp people who are well trained in a specific way of looking at scripture,
Hmm.
but they don't have counseling degrees. They don't understand addiction. And if we could support them, they don't have to do it themselves. And they don't have to trust people who say they know, but don't really know what they're doing.
No.
So
I
we
want
can
to.
protect those partners and those guys struggling with the addictions.
No, absolutely. I want to circle back to what you said too about where someone wasn't given like the tools they needed to get through like a traumatic experience, like with breaking up or being cheated on,
Right.
is like, and then just like you said, the misnomer is time will heal the wound, which,
Right.
it's,
It's just not true.
yeah. So what are you looking for besides time then to help fix that wound? How would you help fix
So
that?
I'm glad because I wanted to loop back to that partner situation too. It's very much like sticking a knife in someone and just letting them bleed.
Well, thanks.
You didn't do that.
Oh, okay, good. Phew. Okay,
Okay.
okay. I'm like,
But
wait,
you're
what?
living with that,
I was like,
right?
what? I don't know what dream she's going to have next.
Yeah. But it's not the dream. The dream is evidence that that's there,
Okay.
potentially,
Yep.
right? So if the individual she was married to cheated on her, that is a wound.
Hmm.
Now,
Just for clarification,
yes,
it wasn't a marriage. I just want to be clear. It was like
okay,
a long-term relationship, though.
okay, but
Okay.
it was a significant commitment,
Yes.
right? The the understanding here is often, and I actually believe a partner, like your wife, has a right to your truth.
Hmm.
In other words, she we want to protect her from secrets. Now, we all have levels of secrets. Like my wife doesn't know how many hamburgers I had or pizza I ate or beers I had, right?
Can I tell you a quick story on that? Speaking of secrets and wives, so
Yes.
so my wife and I are trying to eat healthy. I don't know if you go in those spurts like we're gonna not have baked goods in the house. We're gonna not have processed sugars. So I'm like, not in the house. Fine by me.
They're in the garage.
They're in my car. She opens up the door to put something.
Hidden
It's like
under the seat.
she's like, oh, so this is where the Safeway cookies are at. I'm like, well, I didn't bring them in the house because I didn't want to tempt you. It wasn't. I'm trying to help you out.
Yeah, there's gaslighting. No, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding.
Okay.
It's all about you. You're the problem, not me hiding the cookies.
I'm just trying to be supporting.
Yeah.
And I did that once, and she comes back and like I literally had the crumbs on my shirt. I wasn't smart enough to do the whole wipe the shoulder off. And she's like, "So what'd you do on your car ride?" I'm like, "Got some coffee." She's like, "What's that
And
on
a
your
few
shirt?"
extra things.
Yeah.
Well, that's true often in what we deal with.
Okay.
So you will have a therapist or a pastor, well meaning, go tell the guy who's struggling with high levels of compulsive behaviors to sit down at the kitchen table and say, tell her everything, be honest. And that is probably one of the most riskiest things, damaging things that can be done,
Really?
especially around sexual misconduct. You're basically dumping everything on her, admitting I've been keeping secrets and lying, and she's supposed to believe you that you're now all of a sudden not telling lies? You're telling the truth? No, it doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
We have an organized, structured way of giving what we call a formal disclosure.
Interesting.
But that requires both individuals, the guy dealing with the addiction and the one betrayed, getting help individually so they're prepared for what they're going to hear.
Hmm.
So, my partner, who we will hear often in this podcast,
Jane, I'm looking forward to hear from her
yeah,
again.
she's amazing. She primarily specializes in working with the betrayed partner. In preparation for a formal disclosure, she's walking them through the questions she needs to have answered, as well as those questions she doesn't know she needs to have
Hmm.
answered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, where it's like you don't know what you don't know.
Right. So you don't know what you need to ask,
Yeah.
right? There are these core things that you're like scared of, but Jane takes it beyond, as well as so do I. When I'm working with the guy preparing the disclosure, I'm giving her much more information than she's aware she needs, which is including things that she doesn't know to ask, like, did you ever act out here? And I will say, no, I never acted out. So we'll have that list too. The whole goal here, though, is to protect and work with both. Don't want to get too much into the minutia today. I think that'll be an appropriate kind of baiting for another how do we do formal disclosures type
Hmm.
space.
Yep.
But the idea is to live in truth without secrets. And that is a process, not an absolute. We've got to guide from one to the other. And over time, When I approach these things, to love, to trust, to forgive, are all continuums. They're not absolutes. And we have to define them as verbs more. I'm going to trust you the more I have time with you, see you're a person of integrity and character, and feel safe emotionally with you. Right? Boom, 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 boom.
And so those would be the first steps of then the reconciliation, is like you said, is like when you see steps of truth.
Well, that is part of it, yes, absolutely, of the reconciliation of the couple.
Okay.
The reality of that is that's several months into the process.
Okay.
We're not trying to save the marriage directly right off the bat. Our goal is to absolutely save the marriage, but we have to validate the pain and help the individuals of the marriage heal first, because they're the greatest gift to that marriage.
Oh, that makes sense there. Where it's like if you can't have something broken, trying to fix some,
Right.
work uphill.
It's not, sometimes we focus too much on the marriage when we don't realize it's the individual hurting in the marriage that's never been healed. So there's other things related that's coming into the marriage that isn't about the marriage. Like your poor wife's betrayal.
Hmm.
That's not about you and your marriage, but it's affecting you and your marriage. You live in that shadow.
Yeah.
But you're healthy helps her get healthier because she's learning to trust again through your integrity, through your character. And us as therapists can help fuel that fire, give more words, more language, more support to that.
No, that is amazing to think about. Stephen, I really appreciate your insights today. I hope anyone listening, if you have, hopefully it helps you out as well. We'll put something in the description. If you want to reach out to us, an email address, click on that description, reach out to us. If you have questions, if you want to dig in deeper to what Stephen's asking, give us things that you want us to talk about.
Absolutely.
And to dig in a little bit more too, because we love to hear your thoughts and we appreciate you for listening. So thank you so much. Stephen, any parting thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I just want to echo that this podcast is for our listeners. Any questions we can answer, any support we can offer, please get us questions. Obviously, we're not going to be able to answer everything, but we can kind of lump the ones that seem similar and start creating answers and help and support.
One of my future goals for this podcast, not only to help people out, but also to have that Q&A episode where we can do some more rapid fire questions from people that are listening for you, Stephen. So it's not all about me. It's not all about my questions. It's about the listeners too.
It is about educating you, though, Rob.
Yes.
We got to get you smarter.
I can 100% agree with that. And with that, before we get too many stamps of approval on that from other people, we will wrap this up.
All right. It was great being with you today, Rob.
I love the time with you, Stephen. I always learn something new. So thank you so much.
All right. Talk to you soon.
See ya.